So remember that time when I bought the GoPro Hero 10 to use primarily as my B camera and for overhead shots, but then returned it because it didn't work out? Well, today in this video, I'm gonna be talking about the camera that I got instead. What's up, you guys? Welcome to my channel. My name is Courtney, and today in this video, I will be talking about the Sony ZV-E10, which is not the easiest name to say, but we'll see if we can get through this video. So this camera actually came out in August of 2021, and I think that the best way to describe this camera is somewhere between the Sony ZV-1 and then the Sony A7C. The ZV-1 is a very, very popular vlogging camera that came out back in May of 2020. And then the Sony A7C came out back in October of 2020. And while the Sony A7C is $1,000 more than this camera and the ZV-1, based on features, this is kind of, I would say, still the middle ground between the ZV-1 and the A7C. So both this camera and the ZV-1 have the same onboard microphones, and you can live stream with both of them if that's something that you're into. They both have mic jacks, so you can use an external microphone. However, the ZV-E10 has a headphone jack, so that way you can use it for monitoring, which is really useful that the ZV-1 does not have. The ZV-1 has a 1-inch sensor in the camera, where the ZV-E10 has the APS-C sensor, so that means that this camera should theoretically be better in low light. That's also what I've heard. I haven't ever had the ZV-1, so I can't actually compare it, but from what I hear, this camera should be better for you in low light. And currently, at the time of me making this video, the ZV-1 comes in at around $748. You buy the camera by itself, it comes with a battery and probably some cords or whatever, and you're good to go. This camera without a lens will come in at roughly the same exact cost, $798, so like $40 more. So this ZV-E10 without the lens will come in at about $50 more than the ZV-1. And if you had your own Sony E-mount lenses, you'd be good to go as well. But if you needed to get your first lens, this is the lens that can come with the camera body in a kit. It's a 16-50, and that brings you to $798, so it just depends where you're at, whether you need to buy a lens or not. But either way, this is within $100 of the ZV-1, so it's really, really comparable in price. So it kind of just depends based on which features you're looking for as to which camera you would end up choosing for yourself. And then to throw something else into the mix, the Sony A7C is, like I said, $1,000 more, so that brings it to $1,798. Personally, I think that you do get a lot of stuff with that price tag, but mainly in this video, I'm just comparing the ZV-E10 with the ZV-1. I'll still probably throw the Sony A7C in there for fun at some parts. But honestly, I'm surprised that the ZV-1 and the ZV-E10 are so close in cost, because I honestly feel like you're getting a lot more with this camera. Not to say that it's necessarily the better option all around, but I do feel like you're still getting a lot more with this camera than you are with the ZV-1. The ZV-1 is 20 megapixels, where this camera is 24 megapixels. So you're only getting a 4 megapixel increase, but you are also getting a camera body that you can use with exchangeable lenses. So for roughly the same cost, you're getting 4 more megapixels, you're getting an exchangeable lens camera, and you're also getting an APS-C sensor in a camera, which isn't a full frame, but it's still a step up from the 1-inch sensors that you find in a lot of more portable cameras. Again, I haven't actually ever used the Sony ZV-1, but I know it's such a popular vlogging camera for a reason. I think that it might maybe be better for video. As soon as you turn on the stability, you're going to get a crop with both of those cameras, but the Sony ZV-E10 apparently has an even bigger of a crop, which obviously isn't ideal, but you are also able to put a wider lens on this camera. You could probably get, you know, a 10mm lens, and then even if that did do a really big crop, you're really not losing a whole lot. Where if you get a crop on the Sony ZV-1, that's pretty significant, because that's probably one of the biggest complaints that I actually heard about the Sony ZV-1, is that the field of view is not wide enough. So a lot of people will actually buy these really cheap off-brand adapter that they put on the ZV-1 that allows for a wider field of view, but those things don't have super great reviews, and they kind of are just stuck on with adhesive. So definitely not ideal. But one advantage to the ZV-1 is it is about 2 ounces lighter than the ZV-E10, and then as soon as you add any sort of lens to this camera, it's just going to keep getting heavier and heavier compared to the ZV-1, where it's pretty much always the same. And some lenses, like this one that comes with the kit, really doesn't add much weight, but if you put like a telephoto lens on this thing, it could get really, really heavy. But I guess if you're using a telephoto lens, you're not really like vlogging, so it doesn't matter matter that it's really heavy. So again, kind of depends what you're going for, but the ZV-1 technically is lighter and will always be lighter than the ZV-E10. I also heard complaints about the ZV-E10, there being a lot of rolling shutter in your footage when you're filming, like moving or driving in a car or something like that. I honestly probably wouldn't have even noticed it if I hadn't seen other people point that out as an issue, but I know some people are incredibly bothered with it. I'm not sure if the same issue exists with the ZV-1, but that is definitely one complaint that I have heard multiple times about the Sony ZV-E10. And honestly, the image stability isn't super great in the camera, which is definitely a downside if you're trying to use it as a vlogging camera. It's not like an action camera, so it's never going to be as good as like a GoPro for stability, but I still would like to see that get a little bit better in the camera for sure. But if you're really just looking to get super basic vlogging camera that is just really a set cost, you're not looking to spend a whole lot of extra money potentially, you're not super into the idea of getting into photography with your camera, then the ZV-1 is probably going to be good enough for you and you'd probably be really happy with it. It's definitely a lot easier to just throw that camera into a bag and go and point and shoot and not have to spend any extra money on it. However, like I said, if you really like getting wide shots, you're not going to easily be able to get them with the Sony ZV-1. And if you're looking to take a lot of photos, you're also going to be more restricted with the Sony ZV-1. Not to say that it's not a good camera, just obviously since you are much more limited with your zoom options, the type of photos you're going to be able to take with the ZV-1 will be very different than what you can take with the Sony ZV-E10, obviously. Probably the biggest complaints that I would have with the Sony ZV-E10 are things that would make it way more expensive and also quite a bit heavier, such as it not having a viewfinder and it also not being full frame. But as soon as you start looking at full frame cameras, you're talking about hundreds of dollars more. So obviously that's not what they were trying to go for with this camera. They wanted it to essentially be point and shoot camera, but with the ability to do an exchangeable lens. And then as soon as you would add the full frame sensor as well as a viewfinder, you're kind of then turning this camera into the Sony A7C, which is why I say this is kind of the middle ground. I would say the Sony A7C is definitely a higher end camera than either of the ZV cameras. The A7C is the entry level full frame Sony camera to get as of the time that I'm making this video. So very different, but I would definitely say that that's still like a higher end. It's not just the full frame sensor and the viewfinder that differentiate this from the A7C, but that's two really big things if added to this camera would probably price this at the same point as the Sony A7C. I actually had to sell my Sony A7C when I upgraded to the A7 IV. That was kind of sad for me because I did really love that camera and being my first exchangeable lens camera, and it was just a very pretty camera, so I was sad that I had to sell it, but I absolutely love my Sony A7 IV, which I'm recording with right now, and the focus mapping on this camera is just amazing and the new menu system is amazing, but that's a whole different level camera than the other ones that I'm talking about. But yeah, having the Sony A7 IV and the Sony A7C, if you had tons of money to spend on gear, for me, I'm more than happy with both of those cameras. I think that that would have been perfect for me. Honestly, I'd rather have the Sony A7C than this camera, but when I'm going out places and trying to take nice videos or take nice photos, I would take my Sony A7 IV anyway. So just for something to be on a tripod, overhead camera, not that I take out that much, or if I wanted to take a camera that I didn't want to have to worry quite as much about it getting messed up, like if I take it to the dog park with my dog and I'm just doing some fun things with it, this is definitely a really nice camera to just throw in a bag that's cheap enough that if something did happen to it, it would obviously still be sad, but it wouldn't be as devastating as if something happened to the A7C or the Sony A7 IV. But yeah, so I'm getting off on a little bit too much of a tangent here, but basically the Sony ZV-E10 fulfilled my criteria for a B-roll camera, but it was $1,000 cheaper than the Sony A7C, so I couldn't really justify keeping it and then getting the Sony A7 IV as well. But after all that, which is the right camera for you, you're probably thinking, and I kind of already said it, but if you really don't feel like investing in lenses and you want the most compact, portable, easy, just point and shoot camera, that's the ZV-1 for sure. Like, no doubt about it. I think it still is probably one of the better vlogging cameras that have come out. But yeah, if you don't want to invest in lenses and you're just trying to do like vlogging videos, the ZV-1 would be perfect for you. But if you want a really affordable entry-level camera that allows you to experiment with different type of lenses and more flexibility and be able to do better photography, then that's definitely the Sony ZV-E10. You're definitely gonna have a lot more fun playing with lenses and stuff with this camera than you would obviously with the ZV-1. But if you're not looking to invest in the glass, then it might be a waste of your money. Any lenses that you get with this camera or for this camera would be able to work on any of the other Sony E-mount cameras as well. If you wanted to upgrade to the Sony A7 IV or the A7C or the A7S III, any of those cameras or whatever else may come out in the future, you would be able to do that. You just have to keep in mind that because this is an APS-C sensor, that any of the E-mount lenses will work on this, from full frame to the APS-C censored lenses. But as soon as you take an APS-C lens and put it onto a full frame camera, you're gonna get a lot of crop in. So basically, if I took this 16 to 50 lens and put it on my Sony a7 IV, the lens would basically become a 24 to 75, which isn't like a big deal. But if you wanted to use this wide angle lens as a wide angle lens on a full frame camera, it's not really gonna be a wide angle lens anymore. I think that that's about it. So hopefully this was helpful. Feel free to leave any questions or comments down below. I'd love to hear which camera you would choose, or which camera you're going to choose if you're in the market for a new one. Would it be the Sony ZV-1 or the Sony ZV-E10? Or maybe it would be like a Nikon or something. I would love to know which one you prefer. But thank you guys so much for watching. Make sure you hit that like button, subscribe, turn on notifications, and I will see you in the next video.